name is Ken Hers. I'm president of Nebraska Cattlemen. Uh, Tonight we're presenting part two of a four-part webinar series titled Black Swan Event. And this is basically in response to the events that happened the last 6 months with the Holcomb fire and with COVID-19 and the market reactions to this. Our producers are always asking for information. We try to put out as much information as we can through interviews, social media, mailings, but we cannot go into a really deep dive about what is happening in the markets. And that's what we're trying to do here tonight. In part one, last week we had Jeff Stolley from NC staff talk about fundamentals. If you would like to see that broadcast, I think you can go to Nebraska Cattlemen website and find that. Tonight, we're really fortunate that we have a partner in this presentation, the Rural Radio Network, and we're going to have Susan Littlefield be our moderator. So Susan, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, Ken, and good evening to everybody. A good opportunity for our cattle producers to come together and get your questions answered, some things that you may have questions about, some concerns. We've already received a few questions coming in, so we do appreciate that. We've got two great gentlemen that are going to be joining us this evening, and I do have to give a shout out, thank you so much to KRVN, who is carrying this live right now. So we appreciate the guys back in the studio putting this on the air for all of us. Our panels today include Steve Williams with JBS. Steve has worked with Continental Grain Company Feed Yard in Tacoma, Oklahoma, as well as Montford Cattle Buyer out of Guymon, Oklahoma, before joining the JBS team, where he has been for the past 24 years. Our second panelist is Ed Greiman. Ed is with Upper Iowa Beef. Ed is the general manager at Upper Iowa Beef. He also operates a cow, calf, and feedlot operation with his family. Ed has held positions in some of the most influential organizations and companies within the beef industry. So, gentlemen, welcome to both of you. And Ed, we'll start with you with an opening comment.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So, guys, you know, my background is really a cattleman, as you all know. A lot of you know me from my work that I did in Iowa and then national cattlemen's with the committee, with Cattle Marketing Committee. And the only thing that I am going to say right off the bat, and Steve's going to laugh, it's not as easy as you think to run a packing plant. It sounds all great. It sounds like there's a ton of money to be made all the time, but honestly, this has been one of the hardest things I've ever done, not just the coronavirus, but everything that's involved with it. And in order to get the values that you guys see every day on that USDA sheet, you have got to keep every part of the animal, and you have got to have a lot of partners that are taking it all. Don't believe everything you see on that sheet. And I don't know if Steve will talk to that very much from a larger packer perspective, but the last 30 days has been a roller coaster ride with the way sales have been. I mean, you're seeing the way we're selling it today, but 2 weeks ago it was a mess trying to move product. And there's a lot of sales of product that you didn't even see that were either going to rendering or we were freezing and selling as frozen product. And so I think there's a lot we can talk about today about what really is this product worth. It's not worth what you're always seeing on the sheet.
All right, thank you so much. Steve, anything from you, opening comments?
Well, thanks you for having us. Thank the Nebraska Cattlemen's. It's a progressive organization that is always looking out front. We, JBS, we truly believe we're in this together. We're in this with the cattlemen. We're in this with the rancher, the cow-calf guy, and the feedlot. I would like to open by saying the Grand Island plant is really important to us, and Governor Ricketts and his staff have been incredibly helpful to help continue to run that plant and made it a priority. As he says, I can't say any better than he does. Nebraska is a beef state. Nebraska Cattlemen's has been great, thanks to Pete McClimate and the great job he does there. I think to Mayor Steele in Grand Island. And then lastly, and not least, is our great team in Grand Island. All the people that are there working hard. Zach Ireland's our plant manager, and the work that Zach does every day, 7 days a week, to keep that plant running. So I'm pleased to be here and look forward to some questions, Susan.
Well, thank you so much. Do have to mention as well, thank you to KTIC and Chad back in the studio as well. They are airing it live up in KTIC's listening area. Well, we do have a few questions. Just a reminder to our folks who are viewing via the webinar, you can submit your questions on the question and answer tab, as Bonita had mentioned, in the lower part of your screen. Well, the first question that comes in, gentlemen, is why has the market dynamic changed for the industry?
Ed, you first?
Yeah, I can go. So I don't even know if we would call it a market dynamic right now. I mean, economics are a mess, guys. I mean, our economy's not working right. Nothing's working properly. We got cattle are backing up because we can't run our plants fast enough. Meanwhile, we can't get proteins out on the coast, East Coast especially, quick enough for them. I don't even know if I would call this a market dynamic that's broke down, because it's just nothing's functioning properly. And so I think we just got to be careful to put blame on any one thing or any one part of the industry right now, because we just can't get these plants going. That's really the real problem.
Yeah, I think that's very well said. I would say when you look at the market today versus say where it was 5 or 6 years ago, there's about roughly, I'm going to round off here, there's roughly 1 million head of cattle more on feed today than there was 5 years ago. And really the packing capacity, if you will, it hasn't really changed a lot. And as Ed talked about right now, we're just trying to get our co-workers safely into the plant and home in the safe manner that they came in, and enough of them that we can run efficiently. If you look, and today, when you talk about packing capacity today, what really is that? Is that the infrastructure, or is that capacity? Is that the people that come in every day and work hard? And is it Monday through Friday, or is it that incremental Saturday kill that really helps us kill more cattle and be more efficient?
Since you brought it up, I think, Steve, if you could expand and Ed join in, what have you guys done within the plants to keep your employees safe?
Well, every day, the first thing we talk about in our meetings here are employee people safety and food safety. Those are the two things. Without those two things, we don't have anything. That's a cornerstone of our business. And so, Susan, what we're doing today, I think is fairly similar to what I read in the news media that a lot of big plants are doing. As people are coming into work, we have a thermal scanner there. We're also temping with a thermometer, a handheld. So we're getting two reads there. We've slowed the fab down. We've spread people out. We're using at least the 6-foot barrier. We've put up protective plastic, if you will, at workstations. We brought tents in so people can get out, get fresh air, and eat lunch, separated out. And I would say everybody wears a mask at all times in the plants and here in the corporate office.
Ed?
Yeah, so we're a lot different than Steve's plant. Steve's would be a lot bigger. I'm a small plant, a lot less employees, and so we've made a lot of changes. Rolling breaks. We try not to let anybody get released off the floors at one time. So we're trying to have less people in the break rooms. The state of Iowa sent in the local clinic and tested all of our employees yesterday. So we're doing things like that. Same thing with Steve, spreading everybody out. The real problem isn't, for me, the positives. We've only had a few. It's just a fear factor. It's the education. It's also a lot of the misinformation they get from what I would say they're doctors that don't actually match up with what the CDC tells us or what we're hearing from our partners at NAMI. And so that's a little frustrating always for me to be missing 40% of your employees, and yet only, for me, 1 or 2 positives. I think there's just a lot of misinformation.
We have a question, and it's kind of a lengthy one, so bear with me. It says the question is, do the plant closures in the last 8 years in Denison, Iowa, and in Texas, along with California, because of production glut in that region or rising production costs and dwindling cattle numbers? We now have, in some people's opinions, not enough shackle space, and then we have a black swan event. What would you say to USDA if they would ask all cattle packers to develop a comprehensive contingency plan that would ramp up production 5, 10, or 15% to make up for the plant closure during extreme conditions to protect the nation's food supply?
That was a long question, Susan.
Yeah.
I think when you look at it, it was just 4 short weeks ago, we harvested as an industry 680,000 head. It was the most we had harvested since 2011. So I think what we need, and Ed talked about it, we need to get this fear subsided. We need to operate our plants efficiently, and we need people coming in that feel safe and are safe, and then they can go home safe. And I think we're getting there. It's much better this week than it was previously.
Yeah, and I would add to that about building the infrastructure. So in 2000, that would have been in 2000, when I was with the Iowa Cattlemen's, we had the idea of partnering with it at that time, it was JBS or Cargill, on a new plant in Iowa, and that was going to be, that was before TAMA. And we were going to do a greenfield event, and at that time, I think it was Cargill, and we found it was almost impossible. Now, they've built some pork plants since then, but the sheer capital that it takes is just enormous. And then getting the labor. And so I think Steve's right. We got to make the plants we have more efficient, because I just don't see us adding a lot of capacity, except with little plants like what I'm trying to do very fast. So society is just making it hard to build new facilities.
First question from a webinar viewer is, what can you do to improve the market?
Well, I think it's what we were just talking about. What did we kill? The harvest today was 84,000 head. I think it was 84 yesterday. Last week to date it was 502. And looks like we're on pace for less than that this week. We're just not getting enough cattle through the plants, and that's where in Nebraska especially, Governor Ricketts and his team, his staff have been extremely helpful to help us keep running and improving every day. That's the answer in my opinion, Susan.
So can the plants run 7 days a week to help make up for that?
No, you can't run 7 days, but you can sure run 6.
Yeah, Steve's right. It's just impossible to get. I mean, the 6th day is even hard anymore to get people to come in on a Saturday, but that 7th day, I mean, then there's just maintenance. They got to have a chance to do the things they got to do on the weekend there, at least for 1 day, so that it gets extremely tough to do that Sunday.
Another question from a viewer: as an industry, what percentage of capacity is they're asking both hog processing and cattle processing running at this time?
Well, it goes back to what I was talking about earlier. What really is capacity? Because is it the size of the plant, or is it how many people come in every day? And I think that's the question to be answered. But I just talked about the largest kill we've had since 2011 was 4 weeks ago, and it was roughly 680 for round numbers. And then last week was 502, and this week, like I said, is on pace to be less than that.
Kind of expanding on what you guys had just talked about, another question says, what factors are preventing packing plants from doing the expansion taking place over the last 3 years with increasing supply of cattle available since before the drought years?
Well, I'll talk about what JBS is doing, Susan. We announced just nearly a year ago now, we announced the largest capital project really in recent history. We're putting a lot of our profits back into the Grand Island plant. We've got the first phase of the cattle pens finished. The second phase should be finished here in the next couple of weeks. And then we're constructing an entirely new, from ground, kill floor for the Grand Island plant. And that should be completed within the next 18 months. That should vastly help improve our efficiencies and get more head through Grand Island. You know, the chain speed's regulated. You can only harvest so many per hour and stay within the government restrictions. But you can be more efficient doing that.
Yeah, the other thing I would add to that, everybody, is just, so the one idea is to build small plants like what I'm trying to do here. The hard part of that is that I don't have that background that JBS would have, or any of the others, of the engineers, food safety, quality assurance, that big sales team, and then putting together, when you got to sell the whole animal, it's getting rid of everything and then rendering. And so when you put all that together, that's probably what's made this project so hard for me, is just, it's food safety, guys. The things that you've got to do and know in order to run the facility and make sure that everything that leaves here is safe. I don't think, I didn't even realize, to the extent I do now, just what we have to do every day to make sure that when we dress these cattle and put it in a box, how safe it is. I mean, it's unbelievable. And I would urge you all to, you know, at times as cattle feeders, is to, if you can get to a plant, to just come and realize the things that are going on every day at a plant, and how difficult it is to start new ones.
Well, Ed, that was perfect, because that is a question somebody was asking, is what do you see as some of the biggest challenges? And you just listed them. Are there any others that you would think are challenges as you try to build and keep a facility going?
Well, labor's a big one. I mean, that's the battle every day. I mean, the first person I talk to every day is in operations. It's HR, and it's how many people do we have? How many are we hiring? Who are we missing? What spots do we need? It's constant. And the one thing about beef is that we're different from the other commodities, is we're breaking every muscle down. So if you think about the animal, it's not primals, and it's not just subprimals. It's every single muscle is going into a box, which makes it really hard for automation. So labor is always going to be important, or a big issue for beef packing plants.
Steve, for you?
Yeah, Ed said it right. We have a multi-generational, culturally diverse workforce. And that is the number one challenge we face. And you know, we're not going to get into politics tonight, but immigration is an issue for us.
Another question comes, what factors have prevented packing plant expansion taking place? Oh, sorry, I just reread that. What limited bids occurring? Some producers are keeping their cattle longer. We're trying to adjust rations and implement different management tactics to slow the weight gains we're seeing in our cattle. So what can you do to help us? And is lifting weight restrictions an option for us?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, it's really, Susan, in our plants, it's not as much weight as is the length of the carcass. As long as they're not over 58, 59 inches where they're dragging on the floors, that's a bigger issue to us than the weights. But you know what, we put cash bids out today. We're trying, our cattle buyers, we've got 10 very good cattle buyers in the state of Nebraska. They're going every day and trying to make sure any of these cattle that are getting big, we get them in as quick as we can.
Ed?
Yeah, it's the same thing. I mean, my procurement, all we're doing is trying to grab the biggest and the fattest cattle and keep pulling off the tops. I mean, we're asking all of our guys to sort, pull off the top of the pens. We're trying to delay any cattle that need to be delayed. And that's the good news about the beef industry, is we can delay cattle. I think the real problem with all this too is it's pork. I mean, they don't have that ability. And so that adds to the complexity of all this, is that it's just all the proteins are having trouble.
Another question, can you explain why the box beef prices shot up, but the live cattle prices tanked?
So I'll take a stab at that one. Guys, it's just this week, our phone rings off the hook. They're needing product. And so I'm running at half speed. My customers were all set up to take everything that I have every week. And now I have half of what I need. Everybody else is running slower, and there's only one way to actually, it's supply and demand. There's only one way to divide it out. That's put more money on it. The other thing is that everybody forgets is how much more it costs to run the facilities. So I look at what my costs have done, and they've gone up astronomically when the throughput is just so much slower and so much more cost. So yeah, we're selling it higher, but the other thing is there are a lot of cuts that we're not keeping. There's a lot of cuts that are staying on the subprimals that are small muscles that had specialty places to go that were worth $4 to $5 a pound. Right now, they're not going that way. First, because we don't have the people to do it, and second, everybody just needs trim.
Steve?
Well, we've talked about really, we've kind of beat around this answer here and all these questions. It's the 85,000 head that we're harvesting daily. It's the 500,000 that we're harvesting per week here. It's just it's meeting the needs of our customers. As Ed said, a lot of these end cuts are going into grind. But I would say this. I would change that narrative just a little bit, Susan, and go back to what we're seeing in the country, and talk a little bit about the travel industry. I mean, if the Nebraska Cornhuskers are in the Orange Bowl for the national championship, and there's two seats left on the plane leaving Lincoln, those two seats are probably going to go for a pretty good price. And the other side of that is if there's a plane headed out going to a cruise ship right now, those seats are probably not going to be quite in that high of demand. And a lot of these people that booked a flight to the Orange Bowl 3 weeks ago, they probably got a better price than what are booking for tomorrow's game. And every day we're selling beef anywhere. Generally, it's within a 3 to 4 week window, but a lot of times it's 52 weeks out to a food service guy that maybe just got his doors shut in the middle of this pandemic.
Another question is, how are the cash cattle sellers ever going to get their animals harvested when the captive cattle are filling the kill schedule?
Well, that's not the case in Grand Island. We're well over half in the cash market, and you know the cash cattle in the state of Nebraska are the highest quality. I would throw South Dakota, North Dakota in there as well. High quality cattle over where Ed's at in Iowa. We're in the cash market every week, and we'll make sure that continues.
Ed, any comment from you?
Yeah, I can't affect that the way Steve can. You know, we're small, but you know, we're pushing back the cattle that are actually supposed to be coming in here by the owner and myself. Those are the cattle we're pushing back, and we're trying to buy more cattle than we normally would right now, just because there's some people that got some cattle that got to go. They're getting really fat and they got some weight on them. So we're trying to do everything we can with what I would call my committed cattle and pushing them into other months.
That leads right into the next question that comes from a viewer on our webinar. Is some packers are telling feedlots that they want animals to weigh between 1,400 and 1,500 pounds, and heifers can't get that big, so don't feed them. Then you've got the cow-calf operators faced with a bigger discount on heifers when selling heifers as feeders. So why the push to make cattle bigger when it's causing issues on product size at the retail trade?
Well, we're not having issues with the size of our cattle, especially right now. I mean, I think everybody on here knows kind of this April 15th to the March 15th to May 1st, right in here in this time period. That's the lightest cattle weights of the year. Now, sometimes in the fall, when you get into late October, early November, if we don't have an early storm or something like that, we'll have some weight issues out there. But right now we don't have any. And if we're killing 50 to 70% of capacity, every one of those hooks that comes through the plant, I need as many pounds on that hook to get in a box of meat that I can get. It just helps our efficiencies. But I need those pounds on a hook, but I don't need them so long that they're dragging the floor. But now one of the things, and I want to revert back to one of my previous comments, Susan, is we're putting this brand new kill floor in Grand Island that's going to be open within 18 months, and it's going to really help us. If you look, the average weight of cattle has increased, call it 1% a year for the last 50 years. When I first started buying cattle, and I'm not as old as I look, but when I first started buying cattle, an average steer weight was 1,250 pounds. Today, that question's exactly right. Most of the steers weigh, even in the wintertime, 1,450 to 1,500. That's just the dynamic. And I don't think that's going to change. So we're preparing for heavier weights in the future, trying to do more with less.
Yeah, the other part of that, it's not just that the packers want bigger cattle. I mean, we want to put more pounds through on every animal too, but I mean, I'm a cow-calf guy, so we get paid by the pound. We want to wean more pounds of calf. The feed yard, the best way that we can add more is just to get more pounds on all the cattle. It's not just putting more on the big ones. It's making all the cattle weigh a more even weight, and that's what we're seeing. And Steve, what I really saw now that I'm at a packing plant is that now that we're actually looking at all the carcass weights on everything, we're asking these guys to do some sorting for us. And so when we look at our committed cattle that are going in the programs, we're able to make the whole pens heavier, not by making the big ones big, by making all the cattle a more even carcass weight. And we do that, and you just get more pounds. And it's just efficiencies. Everybody's got to be more efficient, so the cattle are going to get bigger.
All right, to the folks that are joining us on the radio and joining us on the webinar, our Packer panel today is Steve Williams with JBS, and also joining us, just speaking now, is Ed Greiman with Upper Iowa Beef. A question from somebody watching the webinar: do you think we've seen the worst of the plant shutdowns yet?
I'll say real quick. I mean, we just tested all of my employees on Wednesday, every one of them. My biggest fear when they get the results tomorrow is what happened. I don't know what's about to come. I have no idea what's going to happen as soon as we find out who's positive. How are they going to react? And so I don't know if I can answer if we're through the worst of it yet.
Steve, any thoughts?
I sure hope we have. I don't have that answer either. We're working hard, literally 24/7, trying to keep our plants running, get them running better. As you know, we've had Greeley down now for 2 full weeks, and we're getting back and going to give it a run here.
So once employees have had COVID-19 and they've recovered, how are you guys bringing them back into their jobs at the plants?
So we're trying to follow. There's 2 different parts to that. One is their doctor's recommendations. So there's a lot of them that have recommendations from their doctors for their family members, and then there's the recommendations from the CDC. So that is a juggling act that I have to work with my HR department with every day. So basically, what's been happening: anybody who tests positive, they've been staying at home for 14 days, and then they come back. So that's how we've been handling that. And then people who have been exposed to the positive have been staying away too until and for 7 days. And that changes with every different medical provider that they work with.
Steve, for you guys at JBS?
Yeah, we're strictly following CDC and local health departments. We're not making a judgment call on that.
All right. Another question is, as you guys have alluded to already, about the increase in demand for beef at the retail setting. Everyone keeps saying that there's enough beef out there, but from a consumer perspective, the shelves are empty.
Well, I think we saw the shelves empty, what, 2-3 weeks ago for, you know, a brief period of time as the distribution channels kind of reconfigured themselves a little bit, if you will. You know, we actually had some of our customers on the food service side sell into some of our customers on the retail side. And, you know, we tried to put those two together and merge them and do everything we could for a short term. I mean, it's no different than the toilet paper being out at the shelves. It's a distribution issue. It got quickly resolved. Hey, the distribution in the United States in this beef industry is incredible, and it's back, and there's meat on shelves now.
So who's your customer base?
So mine is, you know, I was kind of a very, very high quality plant. So we have a lot of steak cutters. It was going to that hotel, restaurant, and that was my customers. So it hurt really hard there for a little while because I had to go find a different customer base, or my customers had to expand what they were doing and find that retailer that they could work with. Because, you know, as Steve talked about it, it was just getting the meat into the right spot. And we need to remind everybody, the grocery store was designed to feed everybody for 2 meals a day. I mean, 1 meal a day was being eaten at either restaurants or food service. If you think about your kids, people at work, and it's adapted now, but it just had to get moved around.
We're a little bit different. JBS is different really than most other packers in the business, if you will. We have regional plants that are, you know, harvesting Holstein dairy cows that are being culled, or beef cows that are being culled, and a lot of that is ground beef. And then we have Aspen Ridge natural product that is an Angus genetics, no hormones, no antibiotics ever. Then we also have a Wagyu brand. So we have, when you say who are our customers, our customers are international, domestic, all across the board.
Another question from a viewer is, how much is the drop credit per head of beef, and what is considered profit for the packer?
Well, that's a good question. Because drop credit, you know, when I started in the business years ago, the drop credit would kind of equal your expenses, and you could kind of count on that. Your hide, your offal, all the things that go into your drop credit. And it's a good question, because today the hides, you know, went from probably 4 or 5 years ago, $100 to a head. They're less than $20 per hide today. So the hides and drop credit have taken a dramatic drop. And with the price of oil as cheap as it is, it doesn't come anywhere near covering the expenses, especially at these reduced head counts.
Ed, anything from you?
Yeah, no, Steve said that right. The drop is just, I mean, every week it goes down right now too. I mean, if you look at with the exports, not what they were in China, and the hides and leather, every week my hide or my drop credit has been going down a little bit all the time. Not to mention not keeping everything that we normally were keeping, and so that's changed it all too with not having enough people at the plant.
We had talked earlier talking about the shackle space, and another question says in 2015-ish, there was shackle space that went offline. Why haven't you guys opened some of the shuttered plants out there?
Well, there was shackle space that went offline. That's correct. JBS didn't take any shackle space offline. Actually, compared to 2015, our harvest is up pretty good. Just through efficiencies, over-accruing, doing everything we can do, our harvest is actually up from 2015.
So the one thing I would say to that is you know, there was a shuttered plant that started in Iowa, that'd be Tama. That started 4 years ago, and so and I'm sure that now that National has it, more than likely I'd like to think that they'll probably expand and make it more efficient. So I think we've been seeing every year there's more capacity coming online, and more efficiencies coming out of the plant. And we've been, who'd have thought we'd do 680,000 a few weeks ago? I mean, I think that shows the industry can do it. And after Holcomb, I mean, look at what the industry absorbed there. We were lost a plant, and they got through it. And there's no doubt in my mind that we'd be getting through it right now if we just had the people coming to work.
And again, that's one of the biggest hurdles that you guys have right now is employment. Another question from a viewer: how do packers gear up to own the fed cattle supply after cattle feeders lose the ability to finance, the violent future moves that we've seen, and lack of interest to continue to stay in this business?
We have no interest in owning the fed cattle supply. We were in the cattle feeding business. JBS was, the Batista family was. We just finished getting out of that business a couple of years ago. So we have no interest in being in the cattle feeding business.
Yeah, for me, as a small plant, I mean, I'm owned by a cattle feeder. I mean, and I'm a cattle feeder myself. So we were just trying to maybe capture some of, get a little bit closer to the consumer. But the cattle feeders will find a way. They'll keep going. They'll find a way to get through all this. We always do.
This coming from a cattle producer in Northeast Nebraska. To start a discussion on why or why not a producer-backed packing house would help Nebraska's beef industry.
So I'll start with that one because I'm producer owned. It'll help as long as you've got a good plan, you've got a good partner, and you're willing to put quite a bit of capital in. I mean, Steve talked about what it's going to cost, the amount of capital they're going to put into Grand Island. I mean, it's just, it's not that it can't be done. It's just the sheer amount of capital it takes, and it would be good. I mean, it would be good for Nebraska, and it would add more competition. But just be ready for that long journey, because it's not going to happen overnight.
Yeah, I think that's well said, and I agree with that. I think that would be great for the industry, be great for Nebraska. I'll tell you one thing that was kind of interesting, and I saw this myself personally here at a King Super store in Greeley, Colorado, when we talked about 2 or 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, when the shelves were empty for just a short period of time of beef. There was plenty of plant-based beef around. I mean, it was here, and we got lots of pictures, emailed or on Twitter. I think the future of the business is good. People want to eat beef, as as the population continues to grow and expand, and I think there's room for all of us in this. And I think a producer-owned plant in Nebraska would be welcome.
Again, we encourage folks that are watching our webinar tonight to be able to submit questions you'll see in the lower center part of your screen. And the next question comes: how much on a percentage with declining offal value, how much per head has the kill cost risen in the last 3 weeks?
Well, it's bouncing around a lot. That's a good question, because you start to get into your offal and your hides and your drop and the things, your kill cost, then you really start to figure out how hard these plants are to run, like Ed's been talking about. But our kill cost, well, in Greeley we've been down for 2 weeks, so that's irrelevant there. But our kill cost on Grand Island in the state of Nebraska has been 3 to 4 times higher than normal.
Ed, any comment from you?
Yeah, no, Steve's right. It's just it's so hard to spread your overhead around in your management when you're running at half the speed like that. I mean, basically you basically double your costs is what happens with all your fixed costs.
So looking at that, how much of a struggle then has exports been because of COVID-19 and getting things to other countries who consume parts of the beef that we don't here in the U.S.?
I think short term that was an issue, just containers and shipping and getting the product there. But everything on the exports really is pretty solid right And you're right. We export products that we really don't consume here in the U.S.
Has the unemployment benefits from the CARES Act and other government payments to the employees hurt your attendance on a daily basis?
No, I don't think it has. It hasn't hurt our attendance. Um, like I said when we first started, we want people to go home in the exact same condition they came to work. We want them to feel safe. We're trying to communicate with their employees in whatever their native language is, through text, through phone calls, through emails, through radio stations. That's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, Steve's right. It's all education. I actually, there was a young mother, I happened to be down in the HR office that came in there, and she was really concerned because she didn't want to come to work because she wanted to, it wasn't that she was sick, she was fine and her family was fine, but she was worried because she didn't understand. And so then I was telling her the percentages and that she's a young person and that she's healthy and that more than likely she'll be okay. But I think it's just, it's the unknown and misunderstanding that's out there.
Yeah, as you know, we've announced we've given raises, and what we're doing is rewarding those people that come in every day, the hardworking men and women that are co-workers to me here at JBS. We're rewarding them for coming in every day, and that's what we have to have.
We keep seeing Packer margin index charts that show Packer margins through the roof. What are all factored into that?
You want that, Eddie? You want me?
I'll stab real quick and you'd be better at it than me, but the problem is some of the numbers that I see now that I get to look at a P&L every day are what it's hard to believe them at times. So at times I think these guys who are putting these together are always looking at if you sold it at the high, if you actually were doing the USDA cutout and making a cut sheet that was perfect, and assuming that you're never going to have C code, you're never going to have any product that's getting old, and then also assuming that your costs are as low as they've ever been, which we know isn't true with labor costs right now. So I think and then I always get a little frustrated when somebody shows the gross margin. Remember, there's some costs that are associated with that. So when you see this $600 a head gross margin, I mean, I don't know if that's quite always right because it's always assuming the best.
Yeah, I think Ed answered that really well. I mean, it's easy to look at your gross margin. You just look at the choice and select box beef and take the USDA average grading, and you look at the spot cutout, and then you look at the 5 area cattle cost, and you go, oh my gosh, these guys are got $500 head margins or whatever the gross margin is. But yeah, like I said, our expenses in the last couple of weeks are 3 and 4 times what they normally would be. Obviously, 2019 was a good year for us. 2019, we had a fairly steady supply. We had good demand, and the gross margins were there. But these gross margins that you're seeing today printed that are record, our P&L is not there on that.
Another question coming in is what problems are being caused? And you guys kind of alluded to this a little bit earlier, but what problems are being caused by the restaurants and food services being shut down and people are eating at home? Once we start to see the reopening, how do you see that also affecting your market?
Ed did a good job with that one earlier, talking about the high quality cuts that go into food service and restaurants, whether it's Del Frisco's or whatever prime steakhouse you want to go to. That's really hard to get sold through Walmart or Kroger. So that's the biggest thing that we've had as far as that goes.
Yeah, this was the first week in the last 3 that my guys who were my upper choice and prime were actually looking for product. I mean, this week was the first week that I really sold my prime as prime and we weren't just downgrading. I mean, the grade's been phenomenal, which has really been frustrating because we haven't been able to optimize on on these good cattle at all, because it's just been kind of a choice cutout is what it's been, and choice sales.
Steve, this question is directed to you. The new USMCA agreement requires trade with Canada and Mexico. Does that agreement require or force JBS to buy Canadian fat cattle?
Not at all. Not at all. In our Hiram plant, we will harvest some Canadian cattle, very few. Grand Island is only cattle that are fed in the U.S. That agreement by no means does that.
We know that there's been a struggle on the ethanol plant side. One viewer wants to know, with the ethanol plant shutdowns going on, is it causing any major CO2 shortages for the packing industry?
We haven't seen any.
We haven't yet either. I know that NAMI, they had a survey out asking us, but they've warned us that we might not get enough dry ice, but we've been getting it yet. So we haven't seen it yet.
Another viewer question, what happens to the cattle industry if the weekly harvesting remains around 500,000 head for the next 2 months?
Well, I hope that doesn't happen. Like I said, I think we're on the uptick at JBS. I think things are getting better. You know, this week, last week, hopefully this is the lows and we start to harvest more cattle. Obviously, if we continue at this 500 for months, that would not be good for any of us.
So I would add to that too. I was on a call with the National Cattlemen's last Friday, and we've been having one every Friday talking about what we can do. And then the states like Nebraska, Iowa, Kansas, Texas, all them asking what can they do. And my comments is the states have a big role here because my governor in Iowa, like yours in Nebraska, has worked very hard to keep these plants open, taken a lot of abuse from some people that she hasn't shut them down. And I would tell your state organizations, keep working with your state officials because these plants have got to stay open. If they do that, they'll stay open and find ways to make sure that we have the people we need.
Another question coming in is, what can producers do to better manage the size and the number of the supply?
The carcass size?
Yes.
Well, like I said, I don't think carcass size is that big of an issue. And, you know, if you want to look at things, you know, I guess from a positive standpoint, today, right now, as we said, cattle are really not that far backed up in the country. The weights don't show it. Our weights have been running above a year ago, but a lot of that's been due to the weather. Last year's, as all of you in Nebraska know, we had a record wet winter in Nebraska and Kansas, which took carcass weights down. I don't think carcass weights are that big of an issue right now. I think the biggest thing the producer can do is be really flexible because, and I'm serious when I say this, we don't know in the mornings how many people are going to come in, how many we're going to be able to run. And it really is good for all of us if we can come in and we get a good run on A shift and B shift attendance is good and we need to pick up another 2 or 3, 4 truckloads or 400 or 500 head, that we're all flexible and we can get those in quickly.
All right, if packers don't want to feed cattle, wouldn't it be prudent to keep producers in business with better bids thrown out if margins allow it now?
Sure, it would be.
Okay. Ed,
So
I didn't know you were.
Yeah, so the only thing I would add to that a little bit is that I think packers are doing a lot of different things. I mean, we always stay focused on just the negotiated trade, but they're sharing a lot of premiums more and more every day as they develop new markets, new programs, new partnerships. I believe they're trying to share all that. I think that's one of the reasons why the grade in the industry has gotten so much better. It's not only just genetics, it's because the packer has said, we'll pay you more if you bring us what we need. So I think you're going to keep seeing more of that. Not everybody likes that there's a lot of partnerships going on, but it's going to continue because it's what my customers want. They want something special. They want to know where it's coming from. And then there's always something being done a little bit different with our partnership feeders. And so that's probably going to continue. And the job of the cow-calf and feedlot guy is trying to capture more of that value, maybe not only through price negotiation, but negotiating the premiums that it gets.
Another question coming in is so many people, and I know you guys didn't want to get political on this, but it's worded that so many people now are noticing the value of these plants and the value of their workers to the food supply. Do you think that this is the opportunity to drive a message of a stronger worker immigration program that is renewable?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. We refer to it here as sometimes we feel like we're the offensive lineman. The only time people know us is when there's a flag for holding. But you're right. I mean, you turn on the evening news, and it doesn't matter which news channel you want to watch. The packing industry, and really, it's all proteins. I mean, the pork industry is hit really as hard or worse than what the beef industry is today. I think that's a good point. And you know, one of the strengths that you have in Nebraska, and I'll take a minute to brag on him a minute, is Pete McClymont. I think those are the kind of issues as a grassroots organization, and really Nebraska's a little bit unique because you've got a really big cow-calf sector, you've got a really big cattle farmer feeder and commercial feedlot sector, and then you've got a really big packing house sector as well, where some states, the majority of states really don't have that. And I think that's something that you can work with your Nebraska cattlemen's and take it. And plus, lastly, you've got a really strong advocate in your governor that's respected everywhere.
Yeah, see, the other thing is we got to keep telling that story. Now that I'm here at a plant, and because I'm a small plant, I go out to the floor and I talk to people, and I ask them a lot of questions about, you know, why are they here from Guatemala? Why are they here from Mexico, wherever it is? And these people are here because this is a great country, and they're really good people. They're all family members. Their kids are all going to school. I get to meet a lot of their kids at functions, and you know they're no different than I look at my great-great-grandfather was when he came here. He only spoke German, and then his generation, the next generation after him, learned English. We got to make it easier for the good ones to come in here. It's way too hard when I talk to them about their immigration issues. I don't even know how to help them, and neither does HR at times. It's so difficult to get good people to be able to get their status corrected.
A question coming in, and it kind of follows up with the employees. If a plant does get shut down because of coronavirus, are some employees able to go work at other plants?
I mean, I guess it's possible. Greeley's the only plant that we had shut down. And like I said, it was shut down for 2 weeks. We paid the employees full benefits, wages, everything while that was.
All right. Another question coming from a viewer. Now, there are some cattle that brought 160 in the meat at the same time cattle brought 148 this week. Was that because those packers paying the higher prices were just much better running packing plants with their efficiencies, or are they just nicer people?
Maybe they're better people. I don't know.
I would just say, in times like this, you're going to see some really, really wide spreads. That's a regional thing, and then I just think it's where the cattle are and who their partners are, and we're going to see some odd stuff right now. And then it's thin. It's not very much volume.
Yeah, it's really thin, and I mean, and on top of that, really the biggest discrepancy is you're right. There was 150 to 160 or 140 something, whatever you said. And so on a live basis, that's roughly 95 or $1, so somewhere in that window. And then yet we had 4 loads delivered in Nebraska, delivered against the April contract at 85 this afternoon.
Somebody wants to know, do you ship to New Jersey?
We ship beef to New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we ship a lot of beef to New Jersey. Yeah.
Yes.
A follow-up question.
There must be a follow-up to that one.
I'm waiting to find out. I'm wondering if there's going to be something that's coming back with that. We all know that we've seen the medications out there that talk about for cattle and COVID. They wonder, are your cattle tested when they come into the plants? And also, what are they tested for? when they come into the facility.
Are the cattle tested for COVID?
Well, that's what they're wondering because, there is the medication out there that they can buy over, for their livestock. Somebody's wondering, is that tested? And then I think a follow-up to that is, what are the cattle tested for upon entering the plant?
Right. Well, all the cattle come through approved feedlots that everything is followed the FDA withdrawal guidelines of any pharmaceuticals that they've had. And then it's there, you can't get COVID from an animal.
Right. With today's sanitation standards at the plant, that risks at work should be minimal. What steps are being taken to mitigate the risks for the employees with this industry help?
So it's interesting. My brother, I got home back to the feed yard one night, and he heard on the radio that they were going to go do a deep cleaning at the packing plant. And he asked me, he says, "What does that mean?" And I said, "Well, it's not on the food side of things. It's not where we actually run the harvest floor and the fab floor. I mean, that would be in the break rooms." But I reminded him, and I'd remind everybody there, that just think, every night for 8 hours, there's nobody here, and we're able to clean this thing from top to bottom. I mean, there's nothing cleaner than a packing plant in the morning when you come in. So I don't believe that people are getting it because of the packing plant. I believe it's when they go home, it's their social interaction that they have, which we're trying to limit here at the plant. But in terms of cleanliness, there's nothing cleaner than a packing plant every night.
Follow up at all, Steve, from you?
No, I think Ed said it well. We clean our plants, deep clean every night. And as we said earlier, we've got Greeley down right now for 2 weeks.
All right, again, folks that are joining us viewing and also on the radio, we're being joined on our Packer panel by Steve Williams with JBS and Ed Greiman with Upper Iowa Beef. A follow-up to a statement that one of you made earlier today, that you talked about the worst probably being behind us. Nebraska had its largest amount of new coronavirus cases today. So is the worst behind us?
I think Ed said that. I said, I hope that it is. I think it varies by region. You can look in, every county on the CDC website and see where the new cases are popping up. But yeah, I mean, I obviously, I don't think either one of us knows the answer to that question, but we're very, very hopeful that there's better days ahead.
Agree.
Well, Ed, this is a question for you. You said that your customers want to know where their beef comes from. Do you support mandatory cool?
No, I'm a believer that that it should be up to the customer and should be pulled through for the market. So, those customers that want to know where it comes from, the next question I ask is, are you willing to pay for the source and nature verification? Are you willing to pay for the extra things that need to be done? So I'm a believer that the market should pull it through and pay us for those things.
And Steve, they're asking for you as well with JBS.
I'm for mandatory ID. I think we need to take it one step further. I mean, why are we behind everybody else in ID in our cattle?
Another question is, does it do the producer any favors to artificially inflate the cash cattle market on extremely thin volume? Example being last week, again, that talk of the 168 being paid on a light volume, and it ended up being at the 157-ish.
Yeah, I don't know if it does any good or not. I don't know that it was artificial. I mean, everybody is in the market, pays what they feel like they negotiate with a feeder. I think that's a good question that I don't know the answer to. But I would say this. I think these prices that we're at are a grim reminder every day of just how serious this issue is in these plants, and protecting our coworkers and being safe and spreading out, and the efficiencies that we need to have in these plants.
Ed, any follow-up from you?
No, in a thin market like this, because of lack of capacity, you're just going to see a lot of. I think you're going to see prices at times you can't explain, and it's going to be very regional and spotty.
And a follow-up again to a comment made earlier this evening, are lower cash markets simply due to larger supplies during an average year, or are other factors attributing to this?
Well, I think right now it's all about this pandemic in the U.S.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, this thing was really cooking along before all this. I mean, demand was good, and you know, here we are coming in the summertime, and this was all because of the problems we're having with the virus.
You had said it hard to get a packing plant to run 7 days. This question's kind of come up a couple different times. Have packing plants ever had to run 7 days a week?
We've never ran one 7 days, you know, and besides you got to clean and do maintenance on the weekend. I mean, the whole tone of this conversation tonight, Susan, really comes back around to the most important thing that we have as an industry issue. It's not a packing issue. It's not a ranching issue. It's not a cattle feeding issue. It's a beef industry issue, and it's having enough people every single day, whether it's riding pins and doctoring cattle, or helping pull calves and build fence, or working on the fab or kill floor. Labor's an issue in the beef industry, and it's something that we all have to address.
Well, speaking of processing, a cattle processing question comes in that says, would processors start shipping quarters or primal and just grind the rest?
Yeah, that's a very good point. And we've actually talked about that internally. We haven't done that yet because right now we're in a little bit of balance where our fabs are running slower than what our harvest is. So if it ever goes the other way, we'll be prepared for that. But that's a very astute question.
Yeah, part of that too is just finding that mix of customers who are willing to buy that. And there's some of that going on now. I mean, I'm comboing more products than I ever have that normally would have gone into a box. Every day there's guys looking for trim for a grind that I don't have enough of. And so we're looking at the round and the chuck and doing different things with them already.
A two-part question, and you talked technology earlier and the fact that it can't be automated as easily as, for example, the pork industry. But how has technology affected your industry? And then to follow up, can you explain the efficiencies?
Yeah, and you're right. You know, in the pork industry, and I'm not a pork expert, but in the pork industry, there's probably four major sires through genetic lines. And then in the poultry industry, you know, you've got, they all come in looking exactly the same. The beef industry, we are a little bit different. You've got, and one of the questions, one of the callers earlier talked about steer versus heifer. And I talked about the weight that we want on the hook. But with that, you've got a 1,500 pound steer or a 1,300 pound heifer. All those cuts are going to be different. They're going to look different. They're going to be in boxes different. So we do as much sortation as we can in our coolers to try to get a uniform product in front of our customers. That being said, when we talk about efficiencies and the max chain speed, just for round numbers, say the max chain speed's 300. It's just on top of that, but just say 300. And so any plant can run at that level for a max. But then you gotta switch for you know the different carcass weights. You gotta switch for the different cuts. You got a chain that broke. You got a breakdown, and you got lines that are not running full all the time. Those are the efficiencies I'm talking about. I'm talking about 8 hours of running a full chain with no breaks. That's the things that we need to make us more efficiency. That's why we're putting this new kill floor in Grand Island. We're putting this in. It's going to be long runs, long tables that the guys can get in there and really get efficient and get animals through there.
Ed, for you, in the size and capacity that you run?
So the places that I look for efficiencies is not always, it's not on the fab floor, the kill floor, as much as it's in tin handling the product, it's the boxing, palletization, and moving it around that way. That's the easiest spot to go to first. But it just seems like in the beef protein business, we're all about taking care of the customer. You know, the cuts are so expensive and so sought after for different things that when you're pulling each muscle like the way we are, it's going to be very, very hard to automate it for a while. I mean, we'll probably get there someday. Don't get me wrong. I'm sure we will. But it's a little ways away compared to the other proteins.
Another question coming in is, with producer losses very large and the Chicago Board of Trade very easy to manipulate, what other ways do you feel the industry should pursue to assist with price protection and hedging?
I don't know. That's what we have. I mean, we have the CME. And I would say this, and I'm not defending the CME, nor am I knocking the CME, but the CME is the futures market. So when we're at the height of this fear, if you will, this fear factor, the CME is going to price in a discount. It's going to price in the worst news that they are. And as a hedger, it's as you know, you're asking from a hedger's perspective. A hedger's got a fairly good basis right now that's working out for him. I'm not advocating that, but I do think it's trying to price in the futures market.
Yeah, you know what? When I was chair of the cattle marketing committee, it came up a couple times as we need to start our own exchange, or there needs to be a different exchange because people were so upset. And I think everybody needs to really think about. I mean, you think it's thinly traded at times now in Chicago. Just imagine starting a new one and how thin that would be. So let's not throw the whole deal out. I mean, there might be some little changes that can be made. My experience is with NCBA and the work we did with them, and Nebraska Cattlemen's was a part of that. There's things we can do with the CME. They listen to us. They've always listened to the cattlemen. So we just got to keep working with them and make the changes that need to be made.
I think the one thing when you talk about the CME, Susan, is and we're all in this, you know, producer packer. We're all talking from a hedging standpoint. We always need the long hedger. We need the long speculator. You know, when you put cattle on feed and they're coming out in 180 days, you need somebody on the other end of that trade to take that off.
Follow up to your mandatory ID comment, Steve. JBS that you said is mandatory ID for it. Isn't a brand an ID?
Sure it is. Sure it is. You know, our biggest brand today, and we're growing our brands. We're evolving as a company. We've got a really, really top-notch marketing team. Bill Munns and his group do a really good job marketing. And we've got Holstein brands, we've got non-fed brands, we've got fed brands, and then the Aspen brand that I talked about. It's guaranteed under 30 months. It's ID'd back to the ranch. So it's age and source ID, and then it's got a passport or an affidavit that goes with it, guarantee there's no hormones or antibiotics ever in the animal. Absolutely, that's an ID on the brand.
What solutions do you have to help alleviate allegations that come against packers when prices are tough and differential between the cattle producer and the packing facility?
Well, I think that's kind of the nature of the beast, if you will. I mean, anytime the markets are not good. I grew up on a cow-calf operation in Southwest Oklahoma, and you know, I know what that feels like when the market's on the low side. I also know I was in the same position in 2014 and 15 when cash went to $1.70. That's on a live basis. And I know what a high market looks like too. And you know, it's the same people that you're dealing with in both markets. It's unfortunate that right now we're in a time when the financial losses are great. And I hope, you know, I saw the report NCBA sent out that Darrell Peel from Oklahoma State worked hard on with Glenn Tonser and several economists, and hopefully we're going to get some relief as an industry. I say that the cattle feeder and the cow-calf guy get some relief, you know, with this virus that has struck. I mean, this market's not really anyone's fault. There's no one to point a finger at. I would say this: our cattle buyers in Nebraska are as conscientious and as caring as any group of guys that I've ever been around. And they're trying every day to get cattle in. They want to get the heavies in. They want to do the best job for the producer and for the Grand Island plant that they can do.
Ed, for you?
As a little packer, you know, I really can't influence the market like the other four can. But my experience around guys like Steve and the heads of procurements is that in the situation we're in today, they're not trying to beat the market down. You know, we're going to see some trades every once in a while that are lower, but that's not the feeling that I've gotten and all the work that I did with the National Cattlemen's, that in times like this, they're trying to just get it as low as they can get it. I don't believe that at all.
Another question is, how much of Packers per head through put costs increased at this point compared to mid-March?
Well, I talked about that earlier. I don't want to go through specific numbers. I don't want Ed knowing all my costs, but I would say this: our cost in Grand Island from mid-March, when we ran full and efficient, they at the worst point a couple of weeks ago, they were 4x, and then this week they're probably about 3x where we were our most efficient.
Okay, I thought you had a follow-up. Another producer wants to know, why did one plant offer $5 over their bids 1 week, but we didn't see others follow through and do the same?
Yeah, I saw that. I heard about that. We didn't do that, so I can't answer why the one producer did, or the one packer did that. I don't know the answer to that.
All right. So how can we as producers help you as packers keep the supply chain moving as our livelihoods depend on the processors?
You know, I think right now, and again, I go back to Governor Ricketts and Pete McClymont. I think you guys keep supporting them as they're helping us. I really don't know what else the producers can do to help us right now. The producers in Grand Island, you know, by and large, honestly, I've talked to a lot of cattle feeders. Saturday morning, I had about an hour phone call with a cattle feeder right outside of the Grand Island plant. Sunday afternoon, I was on with a cattle feeder from Pender, and by and large, the producers in Grand Island have been wonderful to support us, lend a helping hand, write a letter, you know, to text the governor's office. I mean, it's been amazing the support we've had. I really don't know what else anyone can do at this point.
Yeah, Steve's exactly right. Just keep working with the state associations and talk to your elected officials. That's the number one thing they could do right now.
So you have your fast food service customers. When do they anticipate getting sales back to that 100% mark once they're allowed to reopen?
Well, fast food's there. Now, fast food's a lot different than food service. But I think as we open this country up, we're seeing orders come in now for food service guys for 2 and 3 weeks out. So we're just starting to get an early sniff of that, if you will. But the fast food has been really good. But Ed talked about that earlier, talking about the grinding some of these cheaper cuts. But I think we're close. As this country reopens, hey, people enjoy beef. Beef is the experience when you talk about proteins. And I say this a lot in this building because we do have other proteins in this building. But nobody has a big win. Nobody wants to go celebrate anything and eat a chicken breast. They all want to go eat a steak. And I think when this country comes back and we reopen, there's going to be a lot of beef ate at restaurants and outdoor cafes. And hey, we're gonna be eating beef hot dogs at a ball game here soon too.
Yeah, this was the first week that my steak cutters were back. I had talked to those guys. They were living off of their inventory, just trying to get rid of it for the last 30 days. And this week, on the last, they're back. They're buying some inventory. As everybody knows, those guys need to age it for a while before they cut it, and it goes to those high-end restaurants. But they're getting ready for their places to start opening up, those restaurants.
Well, that leads right into the next question then. And so when the pandemic is over and you guys are back to your full workforce, will you kill and process as many head as you historically have?
Yeah, hopefully more. We're ready as anybody. When we can get back to normal, I think we have a lot of pent up demand out there.
Yeah, there's no doubt the industry will do it. I mean, we saw what happens after Holcomb. I mean, the industry demonstrated what they can do in a hurry.
Well, does a packer do any product promotion or beef promotion? And the follow-up is, does a packer financially support the beef checkoff?
Packer does not. We collect the beef checkoff, but we do not support the beef checkoff. But we're constantly putting money into our brands. I've talked about the Aspen Ridge brands, and I don't want to get into what we budget for our brands, but it would be multiple $1 million every year that we put into our brands. A lot of that is working directly with either our retail or food service customers, working with their brands as well.
Yeah, in the last 30 days is I spent a lot of time talking to retailers, trying to partner with them. We got to that point, strips, ribeyes, and tenderloins, they weren't moving. And so, I was telling them, hey, let's run some specials. Let's do something. Let's tell a story. I'll get you some product. It's a little bit cheaper. You put it out there, make sure you don't pick it up too much, and let's get things going. I think there was a lot of that going on. I think that's why the retailers were able to start moving some middles again. And that's why it feels like it does now too.
So how much do you guys use the CME?
Well, when we sell product, and I don't want to name names, but when we sell product to a food service establishment, if you will, for a year out, when they book a contract for us and they set their menu price, we go and buy the CME cattle futures as a hedge for that product. And then if we have a basis contract that a producer prices, we'll go in and we'll sell the futures there. We don't do any speculating.
A small plant like mine, we're not really using the futures market at all, except for the owners who are cattle feeders.
What percentage of negotiated cattle would be the best for the cattle feeder?
I don't know that percentage. I saw what Steve Kuntz, wasn't it, that had a study out maybe a month ago where he did that. I'm not an economist by trade. I look like one, but I'm not. I think we need to be in the cash market. It's been the philosophy of JBS. We need to participate in the cash market every week. So we have some transparency, first of all. There's always talk about grids and formulas and how you set a base price and those kind of things. But we always want to be in the cash market. As far as the percentage, I don't know what that percentage is, but we're in every week trying to buy cattle in all states.
So that Kuntz study that Steve talked about, that's right. You just can't pick a percentage. I mean, it was different for every region. And so I would urge everybody, take a look at that. It's pretty interesting work. And it's all about how robust the trade is in a region and who's participating. It's not just about a certain percentage.
This is a follow-up question to some comments that you gentlemen made early in the 7 o'clock hour. Are there additional steps that the packers can take for their employees to keep them from getting exposed to coronavirus when they leave the plant?
Ooh, I think that's a tough question. That's a good question, but a tough question. When they leave the plant, I don't know the answer to that. I think we do our best. What we try to do is educate them. We've got pamphlets, like we talked about. We've got flyers that we hand out. We have texts that go into all different languages and try to reiterate what their home states have said, the 6-foot distancing, what we're trying to do, wear a mask. I mean, that's a good question, and that's a real concern we have here, and we're trying to do our part. It's education as much as anything, Susan.
Yeah, Steve's right. Education. I mean, we got posters hung up everywhere in all the break rooms. But like one of the examples of that is we had some buses that were bringing people in from some towns that had labor. We've discontinued that, so they're driving now so that they're not grouped up on a big van or a bus.
One final question before we have to wrap up. It's hard to believe this hour and a half has flown by as fast as it has. But we all know our eating habits have changed, and guys and gals alike are finding out that, hey, we can cook at home. The family dinner table is a great place to be. How do you see that as maybe a win for this industry, and ways that this person is asking the pandemic to better market our product in the future?
Well, I think that's right. We have all discovered that. And I'll tell you, at the end of the day, I talked about this a little bit earlier, but when you look at the product, that we have, and when you look at what is our competition is really plant-based proteins. It's other proteins that are in the business. And when you look at it from a taste and from a health and nutritious benefit, there's nothing better than beef. And I think we need, as an industry, we need to remember that. We need to be proud of what we're doing. And I think one of the weak things that the Packers probably have done, we talked about it a little bit earlier, I think we need to do a better job talking about what we do. And I think we need to do a better job talking about our product, where it's not always when the offensive lineman gets called for holding that you hear about us on the evening news. Because we are critical to this. We are critical to this world, not only to the United States, not only the state of Nebraska, but we've got a really good product to sell, and I'm proud to be a part of the industry.
Yeah, now that I'm at a little plant, one of the things I take home a lot of different cuts, and there were a lot of cuts that I never thought about until I was here. And beef is one of those things that's kind of fun to play with, right? It's fun to cook, it's fun to grill and tell that story, and everybody wants to take those pictures. And we've got so many different muscles that we can do stuff with. I think there's a lot of future there in the beef, because there's still a lot of cuts that we can add value to, and there's no doubt in my mind that they'll continue to add value to them.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. Steve Williams with JBS and Ed Griman with the Upper Iowa Beef. We appreciate you taking time this evening to speak to the folks on the webinar, and of course to our listeners on KRVN and KTIC. We're going to bring Don Caldwell in to the conversation quick. Don, you've got some information you'd like to pass along.
Thanks, Susan. And Ed and Steve, thank you so much. You guys were so enlightening for so many people, I think, tonight. Thank you for answering the questions so honestly and taking the time. I am serving currently as the chair of member services on the Nebraska Cattlemen Board of Directors. And if you appreciated this webinar this evening, bringing you such an excellent direct conversation where you got to participate. If you're not a member of Nebraska Cattlemen, I just ask you to consider that. You heard Steve countless times talk about how valuable peat is to the industry as a whole. I've worked alongside Ed at the national cattleman level in the past, and I just encourage you to really consider the investment of membership if you are not currently. Thank you all so much for joining tonight. Ed and Steve, thank you again. Susan, thank you for being such a great moderator for the entire thing. And we plan to see you all right back here next week, same time, same place, for the next round of webinar. Good night.
Have a great evening, everybody.